You really have spent your career in and around the Gulf. Give us an investor's perspective right now in the Gulf. Where are there opportunities, but also where are there perils?
So it's always been a misunderstood era, right? Because it's tribes and flags. When we talk about the Gulf, there's 54 countries really that make up kind of the consortium of Gulf countries, 4 big ones. But if you think about it, the resource curse, so from 1960 on, the discovery of oil and gas, in these small populations led them in really a 70-year period to dominate the investable world. So from producing oil and gas, being the beneficiary of receiving those dollars up until now, to reinvesting them and saying we've got to diversify, we have growing populations, we're now becoming more astute and aligned in the international economy. How do we diversify? What do we diversify into? And remember that constituencies, it's not a pension fund. So their investable universe of the big sovereign wealth funds, which by the way are the largest investors in the world today, ADIA, Mubadala, PIF, KIA, QIA, are multi-thousand investment groups investing in all asset classes around the world. So the goal at the moment is for them to diversify outside investments and at the same time start moving their own economies and their own young populations to a non-resource-based economy. And that's the biggest challenge. In most of these countries, the royal family directs the politics, and the politics is also driving the business decisions. So you have the same individuals in various positions that are looking at these big themes over long periods of time, and the constituency is the legacy. It's not for the retirement of individuals. So it's booming.
Whenever one invests cross-border, there's political risk involved. How does one assess the political risk in that region? Certainly we've seen it flare up in Saudi Arabia in various ways. How does one assess that and make sure that you're protected from that possibly affecting your investment?
Slowly and carefully. I'm a great example of that. So I think for all businessmen, soft diplomacy is part of the goal that you're trying to reach. Long-line relationships, understanding the geopolitical risks of where you are, the rule of law, the cultural orientation. We've always talked about this cultural sixth sense. But foreign policy has so much to do with it, especially in this region. It's a dangerous place. Why is it dangerous? Because all of these countries have been our allies really from the beginning of World War I. They as a group are the largest buyers of U.S. military equipment. Saudi Arabia, Qatar, Abu Dhabi are our largest foreign buyers of U.S. military equipment. And we have military agreements with all of them. But foreign policy ebbs and flows in that part of the region. And as we've seen now with sanctions, for instance, in Russia and the threat of sanctions elsewhere, the rule of law sometimes is confusing to them as to the difference between foreign policy, military policy, business practice, business diplomacy. As the United States returns to kind of a deglobalization mode, which we can talk to more, which is what's happening. I'm not in favor of that, by the way, but it is certainly happening. You know, this idea of let's make America great. I was always an enthusiast of saying, why don't we, let's make America great and the world better. We're just missing one piece of that. So the geopolitical aspect is so important for the U.S. now not to give up on them and not to just be there to take money. Because if we don't help, if we're not there to hand in glove fix the rest of the things they need, China will be there. Russia will be there. They'll fill that void. The dollar, inconceivable to think that you would be in a petrol business and not use dollars, but we're really at the verge of that about to happen with the renminbi going to a digital currency. You know, any of these things could happen if there's just a mismatch between foreign policy thought, military execution, and business soft diplomacy. So I think it's a moving target, and we all need to be cautious, and we all need to participate. And participating in business is the easiest way to solve some of those cross-cultural issues.
Tom, you referred to your personal experience and being exposed to some of the risks in what you call soft power with investing. You obviously were indicted on 9 counts. You had a 7-week, 8-week trial in the Eastern District of New York. You were acquitted on all charges, I must say. What did you learn from that experience that would be helpful to others?
In 2016, Bob Mueller started investigating President Trump for Russia. And by the way, I have nothing but respect for Mueller and his team. They did the job they were supposed to do, and they did it elegantly and in the manner of which it was supposed to be done. And during that time, he had asked me to testify voluntarily, which I did, and this was about Russia. But in that process, the Gulf states were starting to surface for interest, never for any evil purpose, never for any attendant purpose, just saying, in this campaign, we don't know who Donald Trump is. Who is Donald Trump? I thought this, for me at the time, was an incredible opportunity. I mean, you and I have talked before. I was never really political. Donald had been a friend of mine forever. I thought this was a great opportunity to start chipping at the system from somebody outside of the system. So what got confused with me was my interaction, which was always business. As I said, the rulers of all these countries also are the ones making all the business decisions. So the sovereign wealth funds ultimately are governed and ruled by a monarchy. These are all monarchies. Never inappropriate. The big funds, Adia, Mubadala, is run by some of the brightest young professionals ever, as is QIA, as is PIF. Never an ounce of impropriety. And on the heels of the Mueller investigation, some of the prosecutors, when they left, go back into their own regimes. By the way, let me just start with saying, people are always asking me, are the prosecutors corrupt? Are they evil? Did this come from Merrick Garland? Was he targeting you? And my answer is absolutely not.
Quite apart from your long-term relations in the Gulf, you've been a long-term real estate investor. Commercial real estate is very much in the news these days. A lot of troubles in some parts of the commercial real estate business, and it's affected some banks, including First Republic Bank, that you at one point owned, as I recall, and was on the board of. What did we learn from First Republic Bank? How concerned should we be about broader problems?
What happened to those banks was not a credit problem, not a capital problem. It was a confidence problem. It had never happened before in history. With a click on a phone, you could have $18 billion of withdrawals in an afternoon. Liquidity for those deposits. Just a simple way, I think, for all of us to look at it is, banking makes no sense if you take short-term deposits and you match it with long-term loans, which you're putting on the balance sheet along with the requirement, the government saying you need to buy long-term bonds at fixed rates. It has the lowest capital charge, but those are held to maturity. You don't have to mark those to market. And then you have assets for sale, and you have loans. But your main source of funding is deposits. So during the zero interest rates, huge companies were not concerned with putting their deposits and getting yield, because there was no yield. So they did it for services. So a bank like First Republic Bank supplied extraordinary service along with zero credit risk. That bank's credit loss ratio was 0.003 over 30 years. So it wasn't a credit crisis.